So they complain. They complain about their misfortunes. What is in their hearts? Now, right now here in this text, it's a little difficult to discern. And so there's a side of me that says the answer here is a little bit, I don't know that we know yet. But what would you guess? If you're a counselor sitting across from the nation of Israel, what kind of questions would you ask in order to hear what's in their heart? What would you ask?
What did you expect?
Yeah, what did you expect? You're in chastening, you're under God's hand, you disobeyed God, so what did you expect? Well, obviously they didn't expect this, right? What do they not want? What do they not want? If you're complaining about something that you've got, help me out, Lisa. Yeah. It's a terrible place to not want what God has given you. You can chew on that for a while. Chew on that for a while. What's the result? Well, the consequences. Down at the text, it's not written on my forehead. Yeah, God is angry. And this is one of those places where God's wrath is equivalated with fire, and God's fire and wrath burned among them. This is both spiritual and it is physical, which we're still fairly early in the Bible, so the Bible is beginning to build an image that is going to culminate in the lake of fire, where God's eternal wrath against unrepentant sinners will burn forever, and it is both a spiritual and a physical reality. And so we get little pictures of this that begin to build towards a big picture in the New Testament. God's anger and judgment of fire, and it burns around the outskirts of the camp. Now your sort of question at this point would be, what? Why the outskirts? Now, right now, we don't know the answer, unless you've read ahead. All right? We don't really know the answer. Although we do know something. Where does God dwell in this camp? Tell me? In the center. Yeah, got to speak up. Remember, I'm a little hard of hearing, so, and it's a big room. So, yes, God dwells in the center of the camp. It's an amazing layout of this camp with the tabernacle in the center and the pillar of fire. The Levites camped on all sides of the tabernacle. And then the tribes, the 12 tribes, are set up in sets of 3 on the 4 sides. And the center tribe in each encampment, their banner for that tribe corresponds to the 4 faces on the cherubim in Isaiah and Ezekiel. And so this is the massive camp of God that is moving through the wilderness, led step by step by God. Now, if you were just thinking, if I were to ask you, where is God's judgment going to begin? What would be your even biblically informed answer? What would it be? It begins in the house of God, right? You would expect that the fire of God is going to run out from what? The column, the pillar, the very presence of God, but it doesn't. The fire of God's out on the perimeter, which teaches Israel a very important lesson. God may be visibly there, but God is also everywhere. And even when you whine and complain inside your tents, God is eavesdropping, if you will, on your conversation. God hears it. So what does God provide? God change the circumstance? Nope. What does he do? God's provision here is not a what, it is a who. Not meaning to sound like an owl, but who is it? Moses. What does Moses do? Praise. Further, what does Moses do? He not only just prays, but if we're thinking in a biblical trajectory, what does Moses do? Intercedes. He stands between the wrath of God and the people of God and intercedes. The wrath of God that is both spiritual and physical. And what happens? In his mediating, in his interceding, the old Moses, anticipating the new Moses, stands in front of the wrath of God and intercedes. And the wrath of God is assuaged. It runs off. Isn't that great? So here we are already with an introduction to this idea of fire and wrath, and here's a mediator who intercedes, and the New Testament is just full of similar images and imagery. This is why we push back against substituting modern images. For example, Jesus is a rancher. No, Jesus is a shepherd. It means everything, right? It's not merely cultural, but it has significance. So now they are reacting to uncertainty and danger. And there's a sense in which, okay, we can understand that. It's sort of an intellectual and possibly even a personal level. Maybe you've been in situations where things were just very, very hard, and complaining would have been ever so easy. I don't know whether it be financial circumstances, personal danger, sickness, affliction, whatever it may be. Unexpected reversals, clearly in a situation where you're under the chastening of God. And we can all sort of immediately go, boy, our tendency is to complain, but boy, we really, really shouldn't. Now, we can see that, right? What is unfathomable is what happens next. Okay? So I'm going to read, I'm going to do the top and tail of this text, starting in Numbers chapter 11, verses 4 through 9. Now the rabble that was among them had a strong craving. And the people of Israel also wept again and said, "Oh, that we had meat to eat. We remember the fish we ate in Egypt that cost nothing. The cucumbers, the melons, the leeks, the onions, and the garlic. Now our strength is all dried up, and there is nothing but all this." What is it to eat? That's what manna means. And now the manna was like coriander seed, and it appeared like that of bdellium. And the people went about and gathered it and ground it in hand mills, or beat it in mortars and boiled it in pots, and made cakes of it. 10,000 recipes shared among the women. And the taste of it was like the taste of cakes baked with oil. So flour and oil baked. Yummy. And when the dew fell on the camp in the night, the manna fell with it. Now, the story goes and picks up with Moses. But I want you to see something so we can sort of look carefully at Israel, and then we'll look at Moses. Go down to verse 31. And then a wind from the Lord sprang up, and it brought quail from the sea, and let them fall beside the camp, about a day's journey on this side and a day's journey on the other side around the camp, about 2 cubits above the ground. Now that is a lot of quail. And the people rose all that day and all night and all the next day and gathered the quail. And those who gathered least gathered 10 omers, and they spread them out for themselves all around the camp. And while the meat was yet between their teeth, before it was consumed, the anger of the Lord was kindled against the people, and the Lord struck down the people with a very great plague. And therefore the name of that place was called Gibroth Hatavah, because there they buried the people who had the craving. From Kibroth Hatavah, the people journeyed to Hazeroth, and they remained at Hazeroth. So Moses now highlights how the heart is driving their complaining. All we've seen basically before is just the fact of it and God's response to it, both in anger and in the provision of a mediator. Now we're going to dig in just a little bit more. And so he's highlighting how the heart is driving their complaining about God's supernatural provision for them. So, what's provoking their heart? What's their situation? We already know they're in the wilderness. We already know it's hot. We already know it's dry. We already know it's hard. It's really, really hard. That isn't the problem. What's the problem? Yeah, it's both, right? It's boredom. Now, we tend, as Americans, we have a different meal most every day. Some of you eat leftovers. Some of us eat leftovers and are happy to do so. Some of you eschew leftovers. Pardon the pun on the word. But can you imagine? You get flour, in essence. In fact, you get a flour ground from a seed, mixed with oil, made into a cake, made into a hamburger, made into no meat. Right? This is a food that must provide all of the proteins, vitamins, everything that they need. And they are bored out of their minds with this same food every day. Now, I grew up, again, in Africa. We generally had rice 2 to 3 meals a day. I mean, it was a cheap, readily available staple. My mom was really, really good at fixing rice in just about every possible way. Amazingly, I still love rice to today, but be that as it may. But what is provoking? It's the same old food over and over again. It is this tasteless seed that they pick up 6 days a week. And like I say, it's interesting how Moses puts it, I'd be willing to bet that Moses' wives also had some of these recipes, right? How do they respond? What do? What does the text say? Talk to me. Mark. Yeah. They long for the food that's in captivity. That's their heart. That's what they're craving for. How do they respond? That's how their heart responds. How do they respond at the visible, physical, measurable level up here? It's not just crying. This is standing in their doorways, hands over forehead, large, visible. This is what it's meant to convey. This isn't, sitting at the table and a little tear running down the cheek kind of thing. This is huge. They weep. They complain. And what do they do about, how do they handle the past? Yeah, they glorify the past, right? My present troubles and my past's, and so it's a distorted view of the past, isn't it? Because at least for this generation, what would have been in Egypt, what would it have been like? It was slavery, right? Not only just slavery, but brutal, hard work. And in Moses' generation, there would have been many of their firstborn sons killed. I'm not talking about Passover. Remember, one of the reasons Moses was hidden, because they were going around killing male babies. And so there's this hugely distorted view of the past. Do we ever do that? So easy to unfavorably contrast our present circumstances with the imagined glories of the past. I find this even in ministry. Among many of my Reformed brethren, the Puritan era was the very height and epitome of theological grace, and it's been downhill ever since. That's just a distorted view of the Puritan reality. They diminish the difficulties of the past and they exaggerate the pleasures of Egypt and amplify the pains of the present. Oh, we never do that. We never do that. We never maximize our present pains and contrast them with sort of the dazzling things of the past. Oh, life was so much better when... ... And we can think about our tendencies in this way. So it is boredom and sameness, the same old food. Now, let's stop and think about this for a minute. Why were they eating manna? God gave it to them basically for free. A little bit of effort around their front tent yards every day. In fact, limited effort. Because if you gathered up more than you needed for the next day, it stank. The scripture says it rotted. No refrigeration, very rapid decay rate. So they're eating manna because God gave it to them. Can you put that in a sentence? How would you think about that? They have become bored with God's grace, provision, and blessing. Isn't that it? There's no other way to put it. Now, do you think God was unmerciful, unjust, maybe cruel in giving them the same thing to eat every day? Do you think, no, not at all. In fact, in Deuteronomy, what was Moses' evaluation of the manna? Oh, it was the richest of blessing because the alternative was what? Yeah, starving. Starving. So what do they say to themselves? We've already covered some of this, but I want you to stop and think about what the text indicates. What do they say to themselves and what do they say to each other? What does these conversations look like? See, we don't want to say lest we expose the fact that this is it's a little close to home, isn't it? And so they are talking about what they preferred, what they wanted instead. They are dissatisfied. And that dissatisfaction spreads because it came, where did it come from? Who started this? How does Moses describe them? Rabble. This started with the people who came out of Egypt with the Israelites as sort of the hangers-on. This is the rabble. And they had a craving. Now, one of the things that, though it doesn't say it explicitly, then just my experience with me and with people in counseling and pastoral ministry is that this is also filled with vain regret. What in the world were we thinking? This isn't what we expected at all. And they had a craving. Now it's interesting how this word is used. A powerful longing for something besides what they got. And what they have, pardon the bad English. And so, they're not speaking truth to themselves. They have distorted view of Egypt's pleasures, selective memory of Egypt's hardships. And they craved a craving, a sinful craving for Egypt's varied and flavorful foods. Now, brothers and sisters, we need to be very, very careful. We are wonderfully blessed. We are wonderfully blessed in our station in life, in the age in which God has providentially placed you in this time in history, in being a person who had access to the gospel, to the relative wealth of this country, of this place. I've seen different. And so it's very easy for us to fall into this very trap. We whine and complain about the very blessings that God has given us because we're never satisfied. We're craving a craving. We want more. We want different. And when we have different, we want more different. And what are the consequences? Well, God gave them what they wanted. Right? That's the shocking thing here. Before God sent a fire, what did God give them? Tell me. I'm sorry. Quail. Okay. Quail. Yes. Meat on the wing, blown in from the sea. And now they're in this wilderness, and the quail are for a day's foot travel around the camp about this deep. A million people go out and gather for what appears to be 36 to 48 hours. They lay it all out around their places to sun dry. Now, if we pause right there, what are we thinking? Wow, God is so gracious to respond to our need. Even in our complaining, God will step in and take care of us. Right? What would an insightful, spiritual, believing, satisfied Israelite be saying to everyone else? Don't touch it. Don't. Be satisfied with the manna. It's okay. We will be all right. What happened? They started cooking it. They started eating it. As soon as they started eating it, they're struck with a plague. Now, who gave them the quail? Text is very clear about that, isn't it? God responded to their complaining, didn't he? He gave them what they wanted. It's free. Nobody got to go out and shoot them. I mean, they're laying on the ground for the easy picking. In fact, the irony here is that the second morning, these pigeons would have been covered in manna, because it fell like dew. And all around the camp, right? And it's one of those things, see, the people he's writing to have lived this. So some of the things that aren't stated explicitly but are easy to deduce, the people who are getting this are going, oh, man, do we remember, So their anger against the Lord, they failed the test of the quail, and they are sickened by the plague. How did God deal with them? Well, he teaches them contentment by sickening satiation of their craving for meat. And he deals with those rabble who had the craving. And he begins to prune out, he continues to prune out those who are going to cause a problem. Right in the middle of this is another complainer. Who's the other complainer? Moses. Now, I like to put real dust and dirt and clothes and crumbs in the beard on the Bible stories. So Moses is writing the first half of this, and God says, okay, now time to write about you. Oh, God, really? Do I have... Israel's sin is contagious. Listen to Moses. Verse 10. Moses heard the weeping of the people throughout their clans, everyone at the door of his tent. Whoa, we get another insight. I mean, they're standing in the doorway of their tent, crying, and these demonstrations of discontent and complaining. Moses heard the people weeping, and the anger of the Lord blazed hotly, and Moses was displeased. Moses says to the Lord, why have you dealt ill with your servant? Why have I not found favor in your sight, that you would lay the burden of all this people on me? Did I conceive all this people? Did I give them birth, that you should say to me, carry them in your bosom as a nurse carries a nursing child to the land that you swore to give to their fathers? Where am I to get meat to give to all this people? For they weep before me and say, give us meat that we may eat. I am not able to carry all this people alone. The burden is too heavy for me. If you will treat me like this, just kill me. Kill me at once, if I find favor in your sight, that I may not see my wretchedness. Oh my goodness. Then the Lord said to Moses, gather for me 70 men of the elders of Israel, whom you know to be elders of the people and officers over them, and bring them to the tent of meeting, and let them take their stand there with you. And I will come down and talk with you there, and I will take some of the Spirit that is on you and put it on them, and they shall bear the burden of this people with you, so that you may not bear it yourself alone. And say to the people, consecrate yourselves, for tomorrow you shall eat meat. For you have wept in the hearing of the Lord, saying, who will give us meat to eat? For it is better for us in Egypt. Therefore the Lord will give you meat, and you shall eat, and you shall not eat just 1 day, or 2 days, or 5 days, or 10 days, or 20 days, but a whole month, until it comes out of your nostrils and becomes loathsome to you, because you have rejected the Lord who is among you, and have wept before him, saying, why did we come out of Egypt? Moses said, the people among whom I number are 600,000 on foot, and you have said, I will give them meat, meaning he's counting the men available for military. So he's counting. Shall flocks and herds be slaughtered for them and be enough for them? Or shall the fish of the sea be gathered together for them and be enough for them? And the Lord said to Moses, the Lord's hand shortened, You shall see whether my word will come true for you. Moses went out and told the people the words of the Lord. He gathered 70 men, the elders of the people, and placed them around the tent. The Lord came down in the cloud and spoke to him. And he took some of the Spirit that was on him and put it on the 70 elders. As soon as the Spirit rested on them, they prophesied, but they did not continue to do it. I'll just stop the story there. Okay. What is the means of the temptation to Moses? What's tempting Moses? Whining, complaining people. Right? Here they come to him, 600,000 plus their wives, plus children, plus, right? So here they come, they're complaining. But secondly, it's the righteous anger of the Lord. Lord, you're upset with them. Now, what do you want me to do about it? How does he feel? How does he experience this? Very clear in the text, isn't it? How does he experience this? He's frustrated. He's angry. He's overwhelmed. He can't win. Right? Those are the words sometimes of our own expression when we are surrounded by people who complain all the time, particularly when we are responsible for them. What does he do? What does he do? Now his complaint's a little different. What does he do? Yeah, he complains to God and in effect blames God. Why did you? You see all of the you? Why did you do this? Why did you give me these people? You know. He complains to God about the people and his responsibilities. Boy, what are his heart issues? Man, does he ever just lay them out on the table. Well, he questions God's wisdom in putting him in this situation. You don't know what you're doing, God. Why would you do this to me? He sees himself as an overburdened parent with bad kids. These are not my children. Yet, I'm supposed to provide for them. He sees the burden and the responsibility is too great. Is it? Is it too great for one person? Absolutely. You see, many, many years ago, his father-in-law said, the burden is too great for you. You should set aside, how many? 70 men as elders who can take care of the lesser matters. Did he do it? He did it then, but he didn't keep it up. And here he is now, having evidently rejected God's provision for him, and now he's overwhelmed. He's taken it all on himself. And he agrees with the people's assessment of the problem. Where am I supposed to get meat for all these people? Wait. Why isn't he saying, why aren't they satisfied? How can I help them be satisfied with the manna you've already given them? He agrees that they should be given meat. He wants to escape his dreadful situation so badly, he asks God to kill him. He has suicidal thoughts. In fact, he's thinking theocide. Now, that's pretty low. If I find grace, give me your grace in putting me to death. If I find favor, get me out of this. What does he crave? Relief. What else does he crave? Easy people. What else does he crave? Easy work. Easy ministry. What has God provided? Well, what does God deal with? How does God deal with him? Oh my goodness. How does God deal with him? Well, God speaks to him to instruct his heart and reorganize his thinking. And God sanctioned the leaders he should have had helping him all along. What did God do? How did God provide for Israel, for Moses? The necessity of a plural leadership enables those leaders by the outpouring of the Spirit. And God humbles Moses to recognize an equal work of the Spirit. That's in the paragraph we did not read. This is stunning, isn't it? We'll come back and look at the lessons because I know there's some blanks in there and we need to serve some people's idol. But I know I'm just running over a second, but I taught this lesson in Romania to a group of both Gypsy and Roma people. It's right before lunch. Came to this lesson, we taught this. My translator did an amazing job. And we concluded, he said, we need to thank the Lord for our food before we go to eat. And Gypsy and Roma people said, no. We need prayers of repentance. Because in our hardship, we have over and over again complained to God. I pray that as you go, you also, as I will, be praying prayers of repentance, of a complaining heart. Father, grant us that grace. In your name, amen.